My name is Oliver Coulcher Porter and started playing squash around 8 years old and immediately fell in love with the game. One of the reasons I've kept enjoying squash was because from a young age I idolised the greats of the game, which motivated me to keep training hard consistently throughout the years. I remember reading an article when I was much younger on a player in the 60s and 70s called Heather McKay. I was immediately struck by her achievements. 19 years unbeaten, 16 consecutive British Open titles, only 2 losses in her career. However, from then on, I never heard anything about her again. Last year, having remembered the article, I did some research into Heather. I was shocked as to how underappreciated she was. In my opinion, she must be considered Australia's greatest ever sportswoman, if not in the world. I immediately decided to make a documentary on Heather and record her achievements before they got lost to time. Having researched and interviewed many people, I have to agree that she is the greatest squash player of all time. Angela Smith met Heather as a player on the squash circuit. She got a game off Heather in the semi-finals of the World Championship and won the British Championship.
I would never compare anybody, even the top players now. I'm lucky enough to have played in several eras, and there is nobody that comes close to get anywhere near in her standard. You can talk about Nicole Davies, you can talk about Sarah Fitz, you can talk about all the players since, and everybody that's seen Heather play would say that Heather was just in a different league. In fact, she used to give some of the top men, Jeff Hunt, Jonah Barrington, a real good run for their money.
Jan Grant played Heather in a Masters tournament in the 1990s.
She told us that she started her squash career in the Illawarra when she came here from Canberra to train for the hockey. She was a true sportswoman playing elite hockey, and, well, her squash speaks for itself. She is a true champion in every sense of the word.
Barbara Wall played Heather in the final of the British Open despite being unseeded in the tournament. Barbara was also the first Australian woman to turn professional. She played Heather on many occasions and knew her well.
What was it like playing Heather? It was a little bit akin to being in a hydraulic press, sort of. And you'd start off and you'd have your warm-up, and that was terrific. And then, you'd start in the match. And as it went on and on, the pressure was just so intense because she didn't make mistakes and she got everything back, and she was very accurate. An Egyptian squash professional, Dardia al-Bakari, and he came to Perth once. Dean Williams' father and I managed to raise some sponsorship funds, and we got him to come across and coach coaches on how to coach. And he explained to us that he felt the reason that Heather was so good, he put it in this way. He said, she has a great department of administration, an excellent department of engineering, and a brilliant department of labour. In other words, she had a fantastic brain for the game from a strategy point of view. She had a wonderful stroke production and the ability to play all the shots. And she was probably fitter, definitely much fitter than any other girl, any other woman. So she had all of those really fantastic attributes lined up.
Sarah Fitzgerald was coached by Heather in her career. Sarah was a 5-time world champion and former world number 1.
I first met Heather McKay when I was 16 years old. She came home from living in North America for 10 years and came home to the Australian Institute of Sport in Brisbane, and I was one of the kids fortunate enough to be in that program. I got to train with her She obviously got to coach us and take us to tournaments. She took me to the World Juniors in 1987 in Brighton in England. It was great having her there in my corner, and of course everyone wanted to meet Heather. And then she took a few of the young players away to England on our first trip on the professional tour, and thank God she was there with us. Having been there and done that, she knew exactly what to do, and we were a bit like starstruck kids. First time on tour and travelling to places like England, Ireland, Sweden and Finland, I think was our first trip. And she was wonderful, great person, still is. And whether anyone knows it or not, she's still playing sport and doing extremely well at it. I know we all know now that she's 80 years old and she's still phenomenally fit. I sure hope I'm like her when I get to 80.
Sue Cogswell was a 3-time British Open runner-up and reached a career high of world number 8. Heather was a huge inspiration for her, and they played many times throughout their careers.
Did you went to Toronto to be coached by her, essentially?
That was the reason for going. It was to go and get some coaching from her and to play a bit, and then to be around her, to
Learn what she was doing.
Glean as much information as I could.
And what sort of things did she used to teach you on court then? Was what were her philosophies and what were her fundamentals in the swing and?
No, I don't think that, within the coaching there wasn't so much to do with the technique. It was just about, discipline and how to train and how to practice, and, that's what you do. You do your drills and you just try and get better and better and better, and then you try and bring that in when you're playing your game. And my game in many ways was different from hers. I used to make a lot of unforced errors because I used to go for a lot more shots at the wrong time. So it was trying to bring out a discipline where you're waiting for the opening as opposed to trying to force it. When she went to play American squash, she was good at that as well. So it's just she would be. People often talk about different eras and how would people be if they were those people in today's era. She would be up there, boy. She'd be creaming this lot, I'm sure.
Alexia Clonder met Heather on various occasions. She was a top Australian player and reached the highest world ranking of 5.
What can I say? Heather McKay was an absolute legend. When I met her, I was only a junior. I actually met her in England on my first trip to England. She was there to defend another British Open title, but also the the second World Women's Open in Sheffield, England. Had already been one in Brisbane in 1979, which she obviously won. I beg your pardon, Sheffield was the very first Women's World Open because I was there that year. What am I saying? Sorry. She was an absolute legend. She was gracious. She was powerful. I can remember her when I went on the court with her to have a lesson, actually, at Sheffield, where we were playing the World Open. She just hit the ball like I've never experienced before. She had a different quality of hit. It came back to you with an absolute punch, just like actually Jahangir Khan. But she hit the ball so differently to any other woman that I'd played of that ranking, or obviously not her ranking, but just below her. She was unbeaten. She was my idol from the very first time I picked up a squash racket at 13. I think most people, especially women, aspire to be like her. She just had this grace around her on the court and off the court. She was very unassuming, very humble, very modest. I met her a couple of times over my career. Another time I can remember was 1995 at the Women's World Junior in Sydney, where again I went on to the court with her, And again, even though that was like in 85, the first time I hit with her in 79, so that was a couple of years later, so the same kind of punch behind that ball. It came back to you with such ferociousness and power. And I just, as I said, I was in awe. I was standing on the other side of the court, just going on in absolute awe. And my mouth was open because I just couldn't believe how she hit the ball. I had never experienced anything like it.
Rhonda Thorne was a former world number 1. Heather was a huge idol for Rhonda throughout her career. Heather also managed her Australian team in 1981.
I saw Heather win a number of British Open championships and also her 2 World Opens. The first here in Brisbane, in my hometown, and the second and the most impressive one was in Birmingham, England. She was 38 years of age at the time, living in Toronto, semi-retired, and she travelled to England for the championships, and she lost the first game in the final to Sue Cogswell, 9-6. She was extremely nervous. She had not much match play. Anyway, she went off after the first game, had a chat to her husband Brian, and came back on, and it was the old Heather McKay, and it was all downhill for Sue Cogswell from then. Further after that, I had the privilege of having Heather as my coach and manager of the 1981 successful Australian women's team in Toronto. Heather was a real role model for me coming through in my career, and I know that she was inspirational for the other younger generation that came through, Sarah Fitzgerald and Michelle Martin, and they aspired to great things. Heather McKay is an icon of our sport.
I hope this short documentary has given you an insight into one of the greatest ever squash players and one of my idols.